Welcome to Swap School, where we take the mystery out of late model Hemi swaps. If you've ever looked at a Gen 3 Hemi swap and thought, there's no way it should be this complicated, well, you're in the right place. I'm Blake Anderman, and on this podcast we break down wiring, electronics, tuning, accessories, and everything in between step by step. This is so real enthusiasts can understand it without the headaches and all the nuances. Swap School is proudly sponsored by Sublime Technologies, the premier source for Gen 3 Hemi swap components, built by people who actually do the swaps. No gatekeeping, no guesswork, just real knowledge. Class is in session, let's get to swapping. Welcome back to class, everyone, and thank you for joining us for Lesson 4. This lesson covers the third tier in our Hemi swap system, which is exhaust. Before we really get into this episode, or this lesson, what I want to do is I want to clarify a couple things. One is the definition of the component that is attached to the cylinder head. For the purpose of this lesson, anything that is classified as a manifold is going to be cast in construction, one-piece design. Anything referred to as a header is going to be a fabricated component, usually tubular in design, ranging in all sorts of shapes and bends. So there we have it. Out of the basis, before we get started, if I say exhaust manifold, it means cast iron. If I say header, it means fabricated tube. When we're talking about exhaust, we really want to look at the system as a whole and start from one end, working our way through to the other. Starting in the middle or starting at the rear of the vehicle, just like when you're fabricating it, is kind of a recipe for disaster. You're letting the tail wag the dog. Start at the front, figure out what fits coming out of the engine, and work your way back towards the tailpipes, tips, turn downs, whatever you want. All the T's. Tailpipes, tips, turn downs. At the start of our exhaust system design, we really need to take a step back and ask ourselves a really honest question. What's our desired outcome? Are we wanting all-out maximum performance? Are we wanting something that's near artistic, where the welds are beautifully TIG welded and everything is just neat as a pen and gorgeous for a show car application? Or do we want something more budget friendly, economic, and as simplistic as possible? That's really what we need to do here before we go too far down the rabbit hole of collecting items, putting things together, and sorting out our exhaust system. We need to know what the main objective is. Do you want to go fast? Do you want to be reliable? Do you want to be pretty? Or a mix of all those items. When it comes to the budget-minded setups, I would really have to say factory cast exhaust manifolds are the go-to. They fit such a wide variety of applications, and they're very easy to come by. The gold standard for exhaust manifolds, factory exhaust manifolds, is none other than the Jeep Grand Cherokee. They were always very tight-fitting, and they would really just go in just about anything. So much to the fact that in the early days of Hemi swaps, you had companies such as Year One selling them specifically as a Hemi swap header because it really just fit everything. It was a log-style manifold that had about a 45-degree turn down at the collector and would clear almost everything. The truck exhaust manifolds from those years, not so much. The reason being is on the passenger side, the collector would point straight towards the firewall, and most vehicles you'd swap the engine into, creating a conflict. It's almost impossible to route exhaust piping straight back off that passenger side cylinder head. So those weren't the ones. The Jeep Grand Cherokee, and consequently the Durango, same thing, same part number, they were the gold standard. Everybody went to those things, and they worked so well. The key thing about this is it's very year specific. 2005 through 2008, with the earlier 5.7 Hemis, those exhaust ports are very specific. They don't fit 6.1 Hemi or the later 5.7s and 6.4s or 6.1s. When the Eagle engine came out in 2009, Chrysler said, hey, let's go ahead and adapt our intake and exhaust ports to all match and become more modular. It flowed better, it had overall better performance. What you'll see if you have an older Hemi and you really want a budget-friendly, tight-fitting exhaust option, the go-to is like that '05 through 2008 Jeep Grand Cherokee exhaust manifold. I do believe the numbers cast on the manifolds, and don't quote me on this, is 3505 and 3506. It's been a long time since I looked at those numbers, but it's something along those lines. Starting in 2009, when the port shape changed, those Jeep Grand Cherokee manifolds became even better options for some of you guys. You could put them on an Eagle 5.7, you can put them on a 6.1, you could put them on a 6.4. All of those would bolt right up and be more or less port matched, as best as you can be for a factory cast component. It's not precision port matched, it just matches, it bolts right on. They do typically have a smaller collector, about a 2.5-inch collector, as opposed to a 3-inch collector, which, on a 6.4 may hurt your performance a little bit, but it's going to bolt right on, and it's going to solve a lot of problems for you guys trying to do something budget conscious. There are other manufacturers out there that offer these kind of cast manifolds as well. Holley and the Blackheart is one that comes to mind. Also, a very good option, not quite as tight fitting as the Jeep Grand Cherokee, but it offers a more simplistic flange output design, and it can be used in all sorts of applications. If you don't have a junkyard around you, or you don't have access to used exhaust manifolds from the Jeep Grand Cherokee, I really would push you towards the Holley setup. And the reason is, buying all the Jeep Grand Cherokee manifolds online from a place like Rock Auto, it's all going to add up. You have to buy each manifold separate, the left side, the right side. You have to buy the bolts, the gaskets, and the collector flanges. That's all going to add up and probably cost you around $400 to $450 versus just buying the Holley cast kit that comes with all of that stuff for around $300, $350. And the choice is yours. They accomplish the same thing, but if we're keeping with the budget in mind, that's the way you go, the manifolds that we talked about. Cast manifolds do have a little bit of a restrictive flow to them, just due to the nature of their design, and they're never going to give you all-out optimal performance. They won't. But they're going to be durable, they're going to have less noise in the engine compartment, and they're really just going to be a straightforward piece. They look pretty good too. They don't look that bad as long as you coat them or get coated ones. They shouldn't, flash rust or get any type of surface rust on them. Moving forward, let's talk about headers. Headers are very application specific, and they have to be. Most of them are tuned. You hear terms like equal length headers. That means every single primary tube coming off of each cylinder has the same length, giving you the same surface area of flow of exhaust gas. This is supposed to improve performance, reduce scavenging, all types of things like that, but it comes at a price. Long tube headers are very expensive, and they're often hard to come by, with companies either discontinuing them or having them on long back order. It's hard to get them. You'll probably pony up about $1,200 to $2,000 for a set of long tubes, depending on who you get them from, as opposed to the previously mentioned $350, $400 for a cast manifold. If you are really wanting all-out performance, the header is the way to go. It is going to give you a lot more flow and a lot more intent fluid design than a cast manifold will. It's also going to, and some people say, look prettier. If it's in stainless steel or ceramic coated, it's really going to give you that show car appearance and set you up for the rest of your exhaust system. The choice is yours. Find what fits. They don't always make headers for applications out there. I'll give you an example. The Dodge Dakota trucks. When these swaps really became popular with the Dakota guys, a lot of people were using the manifolds, and then Blackheart came out with mid-length headers for them. I'm not exactly sure why, but they have been discontinued, and now those things are like gold. I'm talking about $2,500 a set, NOS, if you can still find them. People love them. They covet these headers. They're really good quality headers, but they're just not available anymore. So what do? If you don't have the access to the headers, you have to go to a cast manifold to get the job done, or a shorty tubular header from Holley or one of those companies, but it still performs like a cast manifold. It's up to you. Odd swaps such as J bodies, F, N, all those odd year cars, if you're looking at an Aspen or a Valkyrie or something like that, they really don't make long tubes for those setups. So getting something to fit out of the box is going to be very complicated or very expensive if you have to fabricate some from scratch. Really don't recommend that. If you have an oddball car that you are swapping, stick with the cast manifolds and you should be good. With the exhaust coming out of the engine and routed into a collector, we can now move forward to the next section of the exhaust, which is your mid pipes, your catalytic converters, and all of those items just after the engine. If you live in a heavily regulated state, such as California or New York, you're going to have to do catalytic converters. The laws are very interesting when it comes to those states. They tend to lean towards requiring the emissions of a vehicle's engine year. If you have a 1960s vehicle that initially didn't have the catalytic converters and you put a modern engine into it, the state would like to see the catalytic converters that came along with that modern engine, because they're looking at the powertrain and they're not looking at the vehicle. More flexible states look at the vehicle as a whole and said, well, hey, it never had catalytic converters from the get-go, no need to start now. You'll need to follow up with the laws in your own state to determine which is legal for you for on and off-road purposes, but that's just that high-level overview when it comes to catalytic converters. The requirements are very state-specific, and there are many options out there. You can get high flow, you can get OE style, or you can get delete pipes if it's a fully off-road setup and you don't really have any regulations to worry about. The catalytic converter will help with some of the noxious fumes and the smells coming out of the tailpipe. It will help with noise suppression. So if you want something that's a little bit more milder and less raspy when it comes to a Hemi, it acts like a resonator. The catalytic converter acts as a first stage resonator and will help mellow out the sound. It won't be as raspy, it won't be as loud, and it'll be more of a touring setup. If you have an off-road Y pipe, or maybe just mid-lengths with no catalytic converters, you're going to have higher rasp, but you're going to have higher flow. Moving on from that midsection, you now have your first stage of what I call noise suppression. Your first stage of noise suppression can be a resonator or a muffler, if that's what you should choose. If you want to downplay the rasp and that glass pack sound, I would definitely look into adding a resonator and then a chambered muffler. If you're really not too concerned, with the rasp and you want all-out performance, straight through bullet muffler with perforated inserts and fiberglass packing or stainless mesh packing is the way to go. Route it all the way back to the axle, and you can, any flavor you want from there on. You can go over the axle, you can turn down before the axle, come out at the rear of the vehicle, which is probably the quietest. Exiting the vehicle pointing outward as opposed to dumping straight to the ground is going to minimize drone and give you kind of the best cruising comforts. It's the creature comforts inside the vehicle where you're not being driven crazy. As we like to do here on our podcast, we are going to give you some real world examples to apply the lesson we just learned. For the sake of exhaust, we actually have two really good candidates here in-house. Dakotas have been overflowing with the Hemi swap world right now. In our particular shop, it's no exception. We have two that are ready to rock with partial exhaust installed on them. The first one we're going to talk about is an older first-gen Dakota with the 6.4 liter and 8 HP installed. It was installed using the Holley mounts for the engine and the transmission, and the owner elected to go with the Holley Hooker Blackheart swap headers for this setup. Now, let's first start with our high-level overview and trickle it down into our decisions that we just talked about. So, what's the high-level overview for this truck? The owner wanted the performance to be second to drivability, but still important. Let's rephrase that. The owner wanted the good, clean looks of the header and the added performance of the header, but he also wants it to be tame enough to drive every day and get to work without a throbbing headache. That's obtainable. We can do that. We can work with that. For a more mellow note or a more subtle note, the cast manifold would have been a better selection, but it would have limited power just a little bit. For the high-level overview of this vehicle, we want maximum drivability, minimum drone, but also an elevated performance over what the cast manifold can give you. This is one of those mixed scenarios. That's why we went with the headers. How do we tone this down and wrap this whole bundle up? What I would recommend going forward from here is to first come out of the headers into an X-pipe. That X-pipe will help balance one exhaust bank to the other, and then will flow directly into some chambered exhausts. I recommend 3-chambered Flowmaster exhausts, as they do a really good job of cutting down on rasp and drone before we exit the vehicle. That's really my recipe for that. If it is in fact a little too raspy still, we would put about an 18-inch resonator in front of the muffler, and that'll cut out the rasp. You're going to get good performance. You have good flowing exhaust. We're going to also use 3-inch stainless steel piping throughout. We're going to maintain flow and have a good bit of volume output. That is how we are going to tackle that particular scenario. Again, you just heard me start with the engine exit. We went with the header. We talked about the mid-range, which is no catalytic converters at this point in time. And then we're going to go to the muffler. We'll see how that sounds. If it's still too raspy, we will add the resonator in between the muffler and the headers. Simple as that. Our second application is a second-gen Dakota. It also has the 6.4 liter and the 8-speed automatic, and it is also running long tube headers. But for that vehicle, I envision a little bit more performance and attitude out of it because it is not a daily driver. It is more of a race vehicle, more of just a street cruiser bruiser. We want to gain maximum flow out of this thing and let people know it's here to stay and it's here to party. For that, we're going to do a 3-inch full free-flowing exhaust into bullet style race mufflers, which is a straight through muffler. I really like and gravitate to MagnaFlow, so that's what we're going to do. And then do a simple turn down just before the axle which will really give you a lot of reverberance and announcement to the world that you're here and you're here to party. That's the way I'm going to look at that. If I wanted to really have the most tame and subtle exhaust out there, I would take either of these trucks, put a cast manifold on it, go through a catted Y pipe into 3-inch exhaust, an 18-inch resonator, and then go through as long as you possibly can. 20-inch 3-chambered muffler, and then out of the muffler over the rear axle and exit behind the rear bumper so you don't have any reverberance or bouncing back of your sound off the asphalt back up towards the cab of the vehicle or the bed of the vehicle. That's how I would do that. Well, that wraps up lesson number 4, which is all about exhaust systems and the third tier of the Hemi swap system. If you have any questions or just want to reach out, my email address is blake@sublimeparts.com, and I really thank you for joining us. Hopefully, you'll stick around for many more episodes to come.